money doesn't really have these preferences. Money's relatively neutral. It's going to go where there's an infrastructure and a system designed to attract it. And so if you're going to work in a public works type of situation, you're going to have a very finite and limited income because it's based upon budgets and allocations and taxing people.
Right.
So I'm a teacher.
You definitely are.
I make a lot more than any of the public school teachers, which, is simply because I'm using a different platform. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. In life and school, we aren't given a money manual. I mean, there's no license to acquire or use money. It's something that impacts us on a daily basis, yet the amount of intelligence around it is kind of limited. Often we develop habits from our parents or teachers, but this is just an area it's not their area of expertise, right? And if it is a topic in school, I think it's kind of limited. So how can you teach your kids? And when you do teach your kids, what are the best ways to teach them? And how do you want to make sure that they have a good relationship with money and deal with money? So I think this is an important topic. I'm looking forward to having the conversation around this today, Stolba.
Yeah, I think this is a very critical and important conversation. So I'm with you on that. I was thinking back to how...
It's funny when you use the word critical now because of the news. I think critical means like peace, like because everything's critical and an emergency. And I'm like...
Everything's so urgent right now, isn't it?
Like emergency is like we're in the middle of an earthquake. That feels like an emergency.
Yeah.
Like emergency being like COVID cases spiked today. I'm like, okay, what does spiked mean? Oh, there's 10% more than yesterday. Okay, that's definitely an increase. And then threat and like just like we're trying to we're diminishing the terminology here.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's not that it's not an issue. It's just that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like life or death right now, make a decision like your plane is crashing. That's critical. That's threat. That's emergency. Or, hey, there's more cases, which to me might mean, okay, be careful, like maybe not go out, maybe, do more social, whatever. But to call things an emergency, it kind of pisses me off. Yeah. Just saying.
I got agitated too. We got a lot of push notifications on our phone from where we live in the last month or so about how things are an emergency.
And it should have been a public service announcement, not an emergency.
Yeah, very different.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel your energy around that. I was thinking of how I learned about money in school. I don't know, like at the elementary level, junior achievement was a program where, I think really good intentions, business owners would come in and teach us how to balance our checkbook or write a check. And maybe that was important at that time, but people aren't really using that information anymore. But I don't necessarily believe. Do you still have a checkbook? I mean, I have a checkbook, but it's not balanced. It's just not
Can we just
a part
talk
of our
about
daily
something
lives.
With money that's just absurd now? Venmo is one of the more absurd things. Like people typing in for everybody on their list to see like what they just spent money on.
I know. I don't understand that feature. It just tempts me to
say the most ridiculous things.
Oh, and I think people do.
I think that's probably what they do. I don't pay enough attention to it. But
my account's private, as you would suspect. But I'm like, well, I don't know why I need to know what all my neighbors are buying. Or, I don't need to know that business. I don't care.
It seemed like we got along better as a human species when we didn't know every little thing and belief and idea and spending and whatever.
I know. I want to spend my time and my energy and my thoughts on other things.
And I'm an oversharer, as you know. And that's even me saying that.
Some would say that. Some would say just open and authentic. Some might say oversharing. But yes, I get that. So I just think back to my education, it was very basic. It wasn't about the overarching themes of money and how to create value in the world like you talk about. It was just very basic. And even my econ class in high school, we wrote a check and then the teacher tried to forge it and see if there was any way someone could breach our account. And I was like, that is not even super helpful at this time. And so I think back to the system that I was a part of, and it was antiquated then, and it's definitely antiquated now because I don't think it's caught up to where we're at.
Well, and here's the deal. I learned a lot of what I learned because I compared 3 different schools of thought. The first one is I was a finance major, and so I had finance classes, including personal finance, which I found riddled with errors. Because what it is it's factual in a very microscopic way, but not factual in the big picture.
Yeah.
Right? So the second thing was corporate finance, which was very different than personal finance. And I felt it resonated with me much more because it just felt more accurate. It took into the bigger picture. And the third was economics. And economics really dismantled everything I learned in personal finance because it was only looking at part of the picture in personal finance, and economics looked at the rippling effect and kind of the big picture. So one thing I want to say is I'm not a number cruncher. I don't look at spreadsheets every day. I don't when people somehow think you're good with money, that you have to be good with math. That's an error.
Oh, interesting.
Money and math are not the same thing. Math can support our money concepts, but money's a concept and an agreement. And that agreement is we all agree that we'll exchange with this because we're saying it's a representation of value. And we just agreed to it. And it's a social agreement. And we use math to kind of measure it. But the problem is numbers in money have a sickness called inflation. And math doesn't have that same sickness.
Yeah.
So even if you have the same amount in your account 10 years from now, that money won't buy the same things it buys today. So the good news here is if you just can understand this as a concept, it takes the complexity out.
Yeah.
I did try to understand it from the equation standpoint, and I went through all those classes, and I do have a good grounding in that. But the reality is it wasn't nearly as helpful as conceptually getting it. Conceptually getting what value creation and serving others and solving problems, understanding money is a byproduct of that value creation, understanding money is a representation of value, but not why you're valuable, understanding that money is an efficient tool for exchange, understanding that money, if it's a byproduct of value, isn't evil. It's simply a tool that allows us to utilize other people's skills and provide ours. That an expense isn't inherently bad. It's how other people earn an income and how we redeem our cash. So when we start to understand these things, I think that's the key to teach kids. Is to really focus on that. And we haven't even got to the question yet, but I'll let you do that because I'm already on this rant.
Yeah. So just as you're listening, you've probably guessed that the conversation is going to be about money and how it relates to teaching your children about money. And Jesse wrote in with a question.
I feel like you
in
would sing the
regards to
song
that.
Teach Your Children Well. Like the Crosby, Stills, Nash, no?
Should we have a song of, the day, when
Are
we
you
film?
going to start singing it though?
Oh, no, nobody wants to hear that.
I'll play the guitar if you sing it.
No. People would press end on the recording and not want to listen any further. That is not my talent. Okay, Jesse's question. He says, I'm 40 years old and I have 2 littles. Through your channel, it has taught me a lot about financial independence. I wish someone would have talked about this in school, but I know they don't. My question is, do you view homeschooling as a good option to teach them how finances work? My wife and I want to set up our children to have a successful future and are worried the school system doesn't do this. School is becoming so expensive, meaning college. Would you say that there are more pros or cons in the school system? And what are some things we can do as parents to teach them about finances early on in their life? Thanks for all of your help and guidance.
Look, it's hard for the school system to do an adequate job because it's built upon a government infrastructure, which the way they deal with finance is atrociously.
Yes.
Atrociously. So it'd almost be like, do as I say, not as I do, if it was a government curriculum, because they're 27 trillion in debt. They don't understand.
They spend more than what they have.
Right. They just, let's go ahead and add some to it's not where I would want. If you look at the financial records of the people in Congress, it's horrific. From bankruptcies to mismanagement to all that kind of stuff. I don't think that this is something that I want public schools trying to attempt, because it'll be, what we're going to have is we're going to have major institutions trying to influence what people are learning. Because what a bank might want people to teach has to do with the opposite of what they would do with their money. Banks don't go and put their money in a retirement plan. They're creating cash flow by renting your money and charging way more for it. And so I think that I just think it would be riddled with errors. So I think that homeschooling is the answer.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you go about doing that? We recently took our kids to the grocery store and said, all right, you're going to buy your groceries and, you're going to see how this process works. I mean, that's something really basic to do, but ultimately was hey, they need to feel some level of responsibility and a little bit of freedom, and at the same time understand what's happening here. Because, one of my quandaries we were talking about on the drive up here is how do I make sure that my kids end up amazing human beings and not spoiled, entitled human beings? How can I make sure that they're resilient and they understand the value of hard work because they have a fairly cushy life, right? So homeschooling is, I think, the answer.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's such a big push towards the unschooling movement. So even going, and that's a form of homeschooling, but it's a different philosophy. But how do I actually give my kids real life examples to learn from, tangible things?
Right.
And so if I want them to understand money, do I have them call a couple of insurance companies to gather information, to compare policies, and then, have a test run on what they would put their money towards? Do it like you did. You took your kids to the grocery store, they bought the groceries, they realized how much tax that needed to be added to the bill, and those kind of things. So I think those homeschooling or unschooling options where there's real life tangible exercises that they get to engage in to then apply their critical thinking skills to ask questions that come up from their personal experiences have way more value than someone checking a box or answering a fill-in-the-blank question in a workbook that some outside entity gave a teacher to teach in 30 minutes in their classroom.
You either teach them or someone else is going to.
Absolutely,
yeah. And so here's the place I don't want my kids learning about money. I don't want them learning from a public school teacher. And by the way, my little sister is an amazing public school teacher. My wife was a public school teacher.
I'm a former public school teacher.
My mother-in-law was teacher of the year. Like we have a family filled with public school teachers, and there's a destructive narrative within that. Yeah. And the destructive narrative is we're underpaid. So if my kids go, oh, they're underpaid, so it's not based upon value, it's based upon, I don't know, like, an unfair, unjust system. Like money doesn't really have these preferences. Money's relatively neutral. It's going to go where there's an infrastructure and a system designed to attract it. And so if you're going to work in a public works type of situation, you're going to have a very finite and limited income because it's based upon budgets and allocations and taxing people. Right. So I'm a teacher.
You definitely are.
I make a lot more than any of the public school teachers, which, is simply because I'm using a different platform. If I decided to teach the same stuff inside of a government system, I would continue to make a lot less money. But to then complain about it is the problem. Yeah. Because I'm basically saying I'm not responsible for my own actions, and that there's, you just have to take what you get because that's what's happening. And I don't like that thought process, and I don't want my kids being influenced in that type of thought process.
Right. And I would like to add that kids are learning about money, whether you're teaching them directly or they're absorbing it through the conversations that they overhear, the stress that they feel in the household, because there is a lot of fear and tension around money in a lot of homes. And so whether you're sitting down and having the conversations or giving them real life examples, they're learning about money anyway. And so through observation, and because kids are very receptive. And so I think the more intentional we can get in our homes about money from a young age, the better.
So here's the 4 categories of how I would go about teaching.
Okay. Tell me.
First off, how do you make money? How is money made? And really that would be one part of the curriculum, making money, because learning how to choose a career where right now the majority of the population, this is the irony. They're doing things they hate so they can afford the things that they love. So what happens is they go, I'm just going to sacrifice. I'm going to work hard so that one day I'll be able to retire and live this good life. Or I'll have the money to take the vacations. But the problem is they get so trapped and caught up in that there's not time for those other things, and they find their life kind of slipping away. So I would really get really clear about career selection and what it is that they really want to do, and identifying their skill sets and their interests, because we don't have enough guidance on that. Right? Then the second is, how do you keep more of what you make? And this is going to be, how do you pay yourself first? How do you create an automated infrastructure? How do you think about production, not just reduction? Where do you store your cash? What are the instruments that are out there? What's your investor DNA? Would be the third category when we move to how do you grow your money? See, investing money, like people jump to that too quickly. And because it feels complicated, because it feels out of reach, they just hand it over to financial salespeople posing as experts, and therefore they get disappointed. So in the grow the money, it's more like them figuring out the same skills they figured out for their career, how they would apply their money based upon what they know. And then the fourth category is, how do they invest back in themselves? Schools have a limited amount of time. They have a lot of students. I mean, there's a lot of limitations that I don't care how extraordinary of a teacher you are. You can't do it all. It's not possible.
Right.
And so when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it comes to financial intelligence, when it comes to business savvy, when it comes to, communication skills, a lot of times, whether it's speaking or writing, like to only have the onus on the schools is limiting, because these are some of the kind of glue factors that really bring people to value out there in the world. So I would really focus on those 4 categories, and anything that could be like a live lab where you're showing them how it actually works and they can kind of see that exchange. I mean, my youngest son's school, they did a really cool deal where they kind of had to go set up like a business and, take money and all this kind of stuff. And it was like a full day fair, and he learned a ton from that, and it was super helpful.
Yeah.
But there's just definitely not enough of that. And I will say, when I was in college, I was reading the textbooks and being like, this is flat out not fully accurate, because here's one example. You and I talk about cost of money more than we probably should, because we're nerdy like that. But cost of money is what can you earn on your dollar? And it's that we always pay interest, whether we pay cash, we forfeit the right to earn interest, or that we borrow when we pay the interest. There's always an interest cost. But most of the time, personal finance isn't taking into consideration opportunity cost or synergistic relationships between our assets or motion of money, or there's just so many things that aren't, taken into consideration. And I just find it to be insane that we as a world is just bought in like, oh, we just hand our money over to these brokers and they put it into companies we know nothing about, and we wait for 30 years and it's all supposed to work out. And then it doesn't work out and people are surprised. It hasn't worked out. Like the news has been out for a long time, yet people are still buying the narrative. It's too complicated. I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. I don't know what to do. It's better than nothing. Like, these kind of things have continued to dumb down our financial intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's time to like really think about it. And I'd say in those 4 categories, there's probably something to address in each of the 4. Where's there misinformation? Where's there's myths? Where's there's limitations? What are the things that what are the unhealthy beliefs that aren't going to allow you to have prosperity? And the biggest thing is, no one's going to come save you.
Right.
Government, they can't.
No way.
Corporations, they won't. So this is really time to take control of our finances and figure it out. And doing it at home is absolutely key, because they're learning, whether you teach them or not, from your actions,
Right.
from your frustration, from your lack of attention to it, from whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I learned a lot about money growing up, but it wasn't what was going to help me in my adult life. So that resonates with me. And I think developing a financial literacy, the onus is on us. It's about personal responsibility. It's about, reading the books, taking the courses, having the conversations. And I've said this before, but a big piece of learning new ways of living, new ways of being, is unlearning the things that have not served us.
Right.
And that's no less the case in this situation when it comes to developing our understanding of money and helping children do the same thing. So I think, do you have any other pieces you want to add, or?
No, I think that's good. I mean,
Okay.
it's money is a concept that I started with. It's a representation of value. It shows what you have, you're able to redeem in this moment, to utilize other people's goods, services, and products to exchange with them. It represents the value you created in the past. It also represents your luck if you inherited it or married into it. It all, it's kind of all encompassing that way, but it doesn't dictate what you're capable of doing.
Right.
It doesn't determine your potential or your destiny. So learn to be more resourceful. Don't let money be your reason or excuse why you do or don't do something. When we have money, time, or ability as our excuse, it's because we're isolated. It's because we're not collaborating. It's because we don't trust other people. It's because we have misinformation. And these myths have been so destructive because people believe in a zero-sum game, win, lose, competition, destroy all, take at all costs. That's what's destroying people around money. Every movie we look at that's been around money is all garbage. It's all sucks. It all is an evil, bad, negative thing, because we're looking at the wrong heroes. We're looking at Wall Street, which they're there to get theirs, right? We're looking at banks. They've got bigger buildings than anywhere else in every single city. And you know what? Anywhere else, if you paid, if I could go buy a building and I have to pay, $25 to rent that every month, but I could rent it out for $300, you'd be like, that's bullshit. But that's what the banks are doing to us every day. And yet it's just a system that we've accepted because we haven't created alternatives. We haven't created our own banking system individually. We just set it and forget it. We hand it over. We watch all these commercials that are telling us this is what we need to do. And ultimately, it's time to take responsibility and take it for yourself and then for your family. And then you can start to influence other people in your tribe or your community. But don't try to tackle the world's problems. Tackle your own first, right? Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.